Hi, I'm Mark Rye with HLB, and if you're looking to go from 0 to 60 with Microsoft 365, stay tuned. Today I'm speaking with Mackenzie Ewing of the Transchem group. Hi, Mackenzie.
Hey, Mark, great to be here with you today. Thanks for having
Yeah,
me.
thanks for your time. Thanks for taking the time to speak with us today. We recently completed a project that had a tremendous impact on the day-to-day operations at Transchem, a project that I would refer to as a fully configured Microsoft 365 deployment, where teams and the channels, SharePoint and team sites, OneDrive, right down to the folder level, really, we're all analyzed and configured to meet the specific needs of the business. When you compare the before and after of the impact of this project we're going to talk about, what's the impact been on the business?
Yeah, no, the impact it really has been night and day, Mark, and the HLB team was so instrumental in helping us just understand, a few of the major challenges we had, not just with our IT infrastructure, but with our communications internally overall. Before working with HLB on this 365 implementation, we had a lot of files, over 45 years of files, and some literally lived in a folder in a warehouse. Some lived on iPhones, on iPads, on desktop computers, on on-prem servers that were, I think, 15, 20 years old, maybe at times. And so we had a lot of files that kind of lived everywhere and no real way to consolidate them in an accessible format. We tried things like Dropbox, we tried things like Google Drive, really just initiatives that weren't centrally managed, that weren't coming from a top-down, more thoughtful approach. And so what we started to see was we were building almost silos within our company in terms of where information lived and how information was stored. And obviously that then impacts communication internally. When I want to work with someone in a different team and I'm on Dropbox and they're on Google Drive, us sharing files, us collaborating on documents inherently has just some pretty significant boundaries and limitations. And so when we looked at working with a partner for 365 or just for a cloud-based information system, we were thinking, how do we break down those barriers to information sharing and to data sharing? How do we collaborate more effectively through digital tools, especially as we navigated through COVID? How do we collaborate as a team that's not in one office or not in a couple of offices, but very discrete across North America and internationally? And then three was our growing concerns about IT security and information security. Something that our team, not having a dedicated full-time IT resource, hadn't considered as much as maybe we could have in the past is what's our exposure to cyber threats, what's our exposure to data breaches. And so we had always taken that seriously and done our diligence around, what those threats could be and put up mitigating practices. But we knew that as we work in kind of this new world where everyone's on a laptop, they're working from a hotel, a Starbucks, a cafe,
Yeah.
a WeWork, wherever it might be, those risks really do start to compound. And so when we looked at working with a partner like an HLB for this migration, I think those were kind of the three big things we looked to accomplish. And reflecting on your question, what's the impact it's had on our organization? I really would genuinely say it's checked all three of those boxes. We have one place, which is Microsoft Teams and SharePoint, where all of our company's files live and where everyone feels really comfortable opening up different folders, different channels and navigating that content. We're using the functionality for chatting and communication in the tool very well, sharing documents. People who have maybe never screen shared even before are sharing these documents that they have and communicating much more effectively. And then just from an IT security standpoint, I think we all feel and have seen quantitative data that we're much more prepared for what the future of work holds and what some of those future cyber challenges could bring.
It's a good point because a lot of organizations, especially through the pandemic, in order to be productive, found tools to help them do so. In hindsight, they maybe weren't the right tools or weren't configured the right way, but they were a necessity. So this was a nice opportunity to kind of step back from that and do things from the ground up again. Now, you had identified Microsoft 365 as either the or a potential platform prior to really looking for a vendor to help implement it. What drew you to Microsoft 365 specifically as a platform?
Yeah, when we looked at what different platforms were on the market in terms of the business case I just outlined, so file sharing, collaboration, IT security, I would say that the research that our team did, myself included, really drove us towards two options, which was the Google suite of products and Microsoft Teams. And when we considered, what familiarity does the members of our team have with both of those tools, almost everyone had worked in an environment where they had Outlook on their computer
Right.
and their email was powered by Outlook. They had used SharePoint, whether it was collaborating with third parties, with more traditional organizations like banks or law firms, or other third parties that oftentimes we would work with pretty consistently. That really led us to say, okay, if we're going to implement something that's a fairly meaningful change in how we work, let's take the path of least resistance and find something that's the smallest diff from what our team knows today to where we're headed. And so that's where Teams really stood out for us. And having watched some YouTube videos and Mark and the team at HLB were helpful just in terms of sending us some content that you can find publicly online about what the experience looks like in Teams. I personally was very impressed with how consolidated everything was into one simple app. My experience working with G Suite and my previous employer, I didn't find that it was quite as cohesive and quite as consolidated in one place as Teams is. And that's really panned out to be the case with our company for sure.
No, it's great that you were able to see that through like you said, the videos and the content that's available, and see really the difference that the platform offers compared to the competitors out there. I guess the flip side to that question is, with 365 as a potential platform, you needed to select a vendor to help you implement it. Can you tell us a little bit about that, and how you landed on HLB as the vendor of choice?
Yeah. No, we landed on HLV as our vendor of choice, not just because we really like Mark and his team, which of course we do. But yeah, we looked around at several vendors, and I'll be honest, we sourced probably four or five competitive quotes and competitive proposals, which we were very transparent with HLB on as we did our diligence in finding a partner. We knew this wasn't just a financial investment, but it was an investment in the ways of working for our company. And so to do that in a manner that wasn't top quality and really set us up for success, we knew could undermine how we communicate, how we collaborate as a company. And that has massive financial impacts, obviously, with an opportunity to have very positive financial returns as well. So we looked at quite a few quotes, and it kind of ranged from anywhere with one individual working from home, consulting on these programs, to firms like HLB, which have teams that have years and decades of great experience doing these migrations. And I would say that HLB, really why we selected them, one was I always felt that, and it's a bit of a cliche, but I always felt there was a very strong, transparent conversation and dialogue. Here's what we can do, here's what we can't do. Here's why you might want to invest in this type of service and why you might not want to. So I felt like we had the information we needed to make an informed decision. And for myself, as one of the key stakeholders in the project, to go to our finance team and our IT team and say, here's what we're seeing, here's what my recommendation is. I always felt like I had what I needed to go forward with. And so that really did pan out as well through the initial stages of our engagement. We found that as we transitioned from that procurement stage into the implementation stage, we were working with the same people. We felt very supported. Everything aligned to what we had discussed. And so in those early stages where I think it's really critical to assess, did we make the right decision? We did feel like we had always kind of had that reinforcement of what we discussed coming into fruition.
No, that's great. That's great. So now let's start to talk about the project. Prior to getting into the technical part of the project, we completed an extensive information management exercise and planning that allowed us to build out this, what we refer to as an information structure, that then becomes the foundation for Microsoft 365. And it becomes that foundation in a way that allows 365 to be really customized for your specific company. Can you tell us a little bit about that process and what you feel the results of that pre-work that we did was on the end result that you see on the day-to-day?
Yeah, the process of really looking at how we structured our company, how we structured our data, where everything lived prior to the migration and after the migration, was probably the most eye-opening, and I would say, um, you know, unique part of the experience, from what I would have expected versus how the
Right.
implementation went. And I mean that in regards of, there's a lot of data, like I shared earlier, that lived everywhere in our company. And of course you think, okay, well, we'll download this all onto a hard drive and we'll upload it all into
Yeah.
one computer and we'll put that on the cloud and we'll break that out into a couple divisions of our company, and that's our infrastructure.
Yeah.
And I was just blown away by the detail and the amount of critical thinking that HLB and our team went through in order to design it in just the right way to help everyone be able to hit the ground running with the tool. And so, when we look at our company, we have a number of different divisions that span across the globe. We have different stakeholders who need access to certain information, and other employees who maybe are not able to have access to other information, whether it's sensitive data or unique to specific teams or regions. And so the thought process that Mark and the HLB team guided myself and some of my colleagues through really helped us to consider not only where information should live and how people should communicate in our company, but also maybe where we had room for improvement internally in our ways of working and how we structured our workforce. And genuinely that was a very profound impact in terms of how we collaborate as a team and how we communicate as a team. And I think we're still starting to realize that. We're about 4 months into the implementation now, or 4 months
Mhm.
post implementation, and still those dividends of that work are coming through and how we're communicating. And you hear those great stories, and I think it's a really nice aspect of implementing a tool like this when you're in person in the office for a couple of days a week and you hear someone say, oh, I saw this information in this channel, or
Right.
I saw that document when it was posted by your colleague in this channel. Just
Yeah.
that kind of realization that work we did not only is paying off in terms of where data lives, but also paying off in terms of how we function as a company. So
Yeah.
that was a really cool process for me, and I was just amazed by how much actually went into that. And that was the aha moment for me where I thought, wow, I'm really glad we didn't try and do this on our own.
Right. The
Yeah.
complexity within your organization, unique, not uniquely, but specifically with different divisions, different geographies, these are things that really need to be taken into account and really need to be built in, right? So as we started peeling back the layers, there was a good amount of complexity that would have been easy to gloss over, but would not have resulted in the system that you needed. So I
Yeah.
appreciate that your team saw where we were going with that and saw the value of it ahead of time
And if
because
sorry to interrupt there, but if I may too, that's a great point you brought up. I think it would be very easy to gloss over that information structure and say, you know what, we'll toss everything into teams and
yeah,
into a couple different teams and channels and call that a day. And that honestly, I think was a bit of my mindset coming into the project as well. Is
right,
let's be iterative. Let's upload everything and we'll figure it out as we go, and we'll find where it lives kind of organically. And I really was impressed to see that that's certainly not the case in how you want to structure any implementation like this. The more thoughtful it is up front, the less legwork you're doing post launch, and the more effective the launch will be. And from our point of view, I'm very grateful that we went through that heavy lifting, I guess you would say, up front, because just glossing over that would have been, I genuinely believe, a fairly significant mistake on our end for how we work together as a company.
so now we're on the other side of the project, like you said, about 4 months post implementation. We have this robust information structure we built out that's fully configured into 365 with teams and channels very specific to your business, all sharing information into those SharePoint team sites. Like I said, what's the day-to-day look like? Because communications, one of the things HLB wants to do is say this is a structure that is meant to work both for files as a file management system, but also as a communication system. So to drive as much chat and communication sharing through the teams and channels themselves. So on the other side of this, what does the day-to-day look like, and how might it have changed from 6 months ago?
Yeah, the day-to-day of how we communicate as a company has changed certainly substantially since the COVID pandemic hit in March of 2020. And I would say was dramatically accelerated by the implementation of Teams for us, which was at the end of 2021, early 2022. So I would say the biggest things that I've seen in terms of communication shift, firstly, is the reduction of extensive email threads where information gets lost, and that are frankly always viewed as a bit of a nuisance from my perspective. I think no one likes to see that email thread with 80, 90, 100 plus participants on it. Hey, as simple as, hey, happy birthday to Mark, and 20 people are chiming in. And as as meaningful as, there's a massive account renewal coming up, here's what we need to do to make that happen. So I would say that just bringing that communication internally out of email into a place where it has a sense of place, a sense of, this is where this type of conversation goes. Here's how you interact with that, with comments, with emojis, with GIFs, with images, whatever it might be. That's been a big shift for us, and that keeps everything in one location, right? And this search bar at the top of Teams, for those who aren't familiar with it, there's just a simple search bar at the top of the Teams app, and you can find information from anywhere within Teams. That's been huge for us when things are posted all in Teams, not just email, not just iMessenger, not just Slack, but all in one place. I think that's been huge. The second piece for us in terms of communication has definitely been leveraging some of the apps within Teams. So having the Tasks app has been a game changer for us. Having some of the different functionality available in unique channels. For us, we do a lot of special project work with major customers. To be able to work in an environment where we're able to asynchronously really share task lists, data, insights, to-dos, project deadlines through these apps, that's reduced a lot of back and forth, a lot of meeting time, I believe. And ultimately just made us a bit more effective in terms of how we work together on big projects that span different time zones, different offices, different specialties. So that's been huge as well. And then I would say really kind of shifting our focus from a quick phone call to a chat message or a Teams short meeting. So prior to Teams, myself and my manager, who's our VP of sales and marketing, we would work very closely together and call each other constantly. So pick up the iPhone, Gerald. Hey, Gerald, here's what I'm thinking. What do you think? Or here's a text. Hey, here's what I'm thinking. What do you think? Now we have one location where if we want to loop in a couple different stakeholders, if we want to chat through something, it's all done in Teams. So we're using that on our phone when we're in the field. We're using that on our desktops when we're at our offices or at our home offices. We're using the call functionality right inside that chat. And I think that has really helped us just to make sure when you do have those quick communications that need to go out, that there's some boundaries and guidance and ways of working around how to do that allow us all to be successful and make sure the right people are always in the know. And I think that's something that teams, whether they're in the warehouse, whether they're in sales, marketing, finance, everyone's seeing the benefit of that type of communication flow.
It's a good point, because it really does create this team workspace, and it sounds obvious that that's what it's supposed to be. But unfortunately, I think most deployments don't get quite to where you are, where it's that effective of a place, that it's more than just files, it's more than just chat. It's actually a place where you can work with your colleagues really collaboratively. I want to pick up on one other comment you mentioned, because I talk about this one a lot, this idea of moving internal communications from email and into Teams. Because you take that scenario where maybe I, as an employee, create an email, maybe I attach a document I worked on for the past week, and I send it out to 10, 20, 30 people in the company, and then I go for lunch because I hit send and I don't have to worry about it. But what that does, the trickle down from that, is really this all of these colleagues having to open that message and decide, okay, is this important? Is it something I need to keep? where should I save it? How should I categorize it? Or, where should I put it in my Outlook inboxes, or where should I put it in a file structure? With driving communications through Teams, it turns that ratio on its head. So now, instead of 20 or 30 people having to do that, the creator of the content decides where it lives, which is a beautiful thing, right? So I know exactly where this post should belong, or where this file should belong. And then when I make my colleagues aware of it, they can consume it, but they don't need to do anything else with it. And there's huge time savings that come with that when you think how much internal email goes, in a lot of companies, and how many people are CC'd and opening messages just to decide what to do with it. So those are some great points, and I'm glad that you're seeing the benefit there. Let's take a look. Having, again, been on the other side of this project, you're seeing the day-to-day benefits. What would your advice be for a company that is thinking about Microsoft 365, thinking that maybe it can do something more for them, not sure maybe exactly what that is, but they know that the current setup they have is not optimal? What advice would you give them in terms of A, planning, and then B, what's waiting for them on the other side?
Yeah, no, that's a thoughtful question. I think when I reflect on our experience, really identifying the need for a project like this came from a number of different sources, and being able to listen to feedback from employees, from managers, from senior leadership, really from all levels of our company, and just hearing what their thoughts were on how we work, how we collaborate, how we communicate. So separating that kind of IT lens, if you will, or the technology lens, from the ways of working, and identifying, okay, what are the challenges that our employees are telling us they're having. And like I mentioned earlier, we heard communication, we heard collaboration, we heard security, we heard all of our documents in one place. All of those things were different concerns, but they were framed in ways that maybe weren't directly tied to how our email works, or how the Slack setup we had works. Yeah. So I think it was really, listening through employee engagement surveys, through communications, through open door office hours, through meetings. We were using Zoom as well before, and so Zoom was one of 10 tools, that we had to collaborate. And you'd hear a lot of, I have no idea where this lives because I have so many tools. So I think in terms of the planning phase, it was consolidating that and making sure that we identified a singular, business case for moving forward with this implementation that was multi-threaded in terms of the challenges or potential opportunities that we were addressing. Really aligning our leadership team, or the right stakeholders internally, to that business case and that plan, I think was critical to getting the buy-in we needed across the organization to move forward. And not just with the investment of a project like this, but with the time that you want to ask from everyone to make sure they're involved and active participants in the configuration of the system. So in terms of the planning, that was a big part for us. As we worked through reviewing contracts and worked with HLB on getting our proposal signed and into the implementation phase, lining up the right people who need to be involved in weekly or ongoing meetings, making sure that they had capacity and were able to align their managers that this is a special project. You're not going to implement Teams every year, or maybe even every decade, right? So it's a special project. We need some people to have some extra bandwidth allocated for this, and we want to do it right and do it right the first time. And that's why we're working with a partner as valuable as HLB, but also why we're making sure we have the right people from our team engaged and ready to go. So on day one, we're hitting the ground running and bringing the implementation path forward. That to me was, I think, something that we collaborated on and your team helped guide us through, but something that we put a lot of pride in is really making sure when we do something, we do it right the first time. And so that planning phase was as important, I would say, as any other aspect of our partnership.
I certainly saw that right from the start, is that your organization was committed to the success of the project. And I'm sure you invested more internal resources in terms of time than perhaps you had thought. But knowing the importance of the project and that it was going to be a success, you did that willingly, and we came to a very successful result. So that was great. So once you build a solid foundation like we have with 365, really, and all of this work we're talking about is really the foundation, that you can grow from. There's so much more that you can do with it. Personally, yourself or with the departments that, like the chatter you hear around the company, what are people excited about with 365 going forward now that they have the foundation in place?
Yeah, there's a lot of excitement around 365. And like I said, we're 4 months in, and I would say that still every day there's a growing discovery around functionality or awareness on how it's able to help us change the way we collaborate. Lots of excitement around just getting everyone on board, everyone using it. I think we've done a great job of driving that adoption with your team. And then I would say the other thing in terms of excitement is ensuring that our team in the field, so whether it's in a warehouse, on site with a customer, doing setups, they have everything in one place on their phone or on their iPad or the device that's near them. So they can ask that quick question, or they can find that file, or they can edit that contract and literally get it signed digitally on the spot, or pull that presentation. Those are all things that people really struggled with, I think, before this implementation. So there's a lot of excitement when you have that aha moment of, oh yeah, my presentation's right here. It's on my iPad. Let me pull it up. Okay, boom, it's right there. We're working through the presentation together. And I think that's something that's been a really positive adjustment for a lot of people.
Yeah, one of the things that I know that the project's really moving, or the adoption's really moving, when you see people that are just outside of the main, project team. So they're not really project insiders, but they start to pop up as, subject matter experts on specific things within 365. And I know you've seen that a couple of times where people are coming to you and kind of pushing the boundaries in terms of, here are things we could do with the platform. So I think it goes to the strength of the platform, but also the availability of the resources. If someone's interested in doing something, there's so much documented about this platform that people can self-serve and bring solutions forward.
Yeah, and that's a good point to tag on to as well. Is we launched a learning management system about a year ago, 12 months ago. And that learning management system was something that did not have a lot of documentation associated with it, other than kind of the basic framework. So when we launched it, we actually had to do quite a bit of customized personal training. With Teams, everything is, you hop on YouTube, you search basic questions, you'll find 10,000 articles or 5,000 videos addressing any specific niche edge case that you have. And that's been a great thing to see. And you're absolutely right. That's allowed people who are curious, who are keen to go in, to dive into self-serve and become power users, much more quickly than maybe I have, or people on our project team itself. So yeah, that's a great point.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate your time today, Mackenzie, to guide us through your thoughts on the project, planning. What's a project like this mean to plan out, and what are the benefits on the other side as you see it come to fruition and roll out? So thanks for taking the time.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. And we do genuinely appreciate the work that you and your team did to help us get this system set up, to launch it, to make sure everyone felt comfortable and sustainable with using it. I think that there's been so much positive feedback, and a lot of opportunities for us to continue to mature with this tool as well, all because it was set up in a way that allows us to succeed for the long term. So we see this as a core part of how we work, and we see this as a big initiative that's going to pay dividends for not just this year, next year, but 5, 10, 15 plus years in the future. So no, really appreciate you taking the time to chat as well today. It's always a pleasure.
Thanks, Mackenzie.
Thank you.